off, the band plays American Patrol.
World War II brought an infusion of federal spending that profoundly transformed the economy of the Bay Area, and with it, the black middle class. The defense industries rapidly expanded as contracts were allotted for shipbuilding and the construction of the Oakland Army Base and a naval supply center. The ports, docks, and railroads went into overdrive as materials were being transported to accommodate the new work. Labor was required at every level in nearly every field. With the thousands of men off to war, employers were not in a position to discriminate in hiring practices. Thus, employment was open to workers of both genders and all colors. As news of employment arose, people flooded into the Bay. Blacks from the South, assured by family in California that jobs were plentiful, poured in from the ports and the transcontinental lines to Oakland. But blacks employed on docks, railroad, or in military supply centers, for example, found themselves disproportionately represented in lower-level work. However, this was not the case at shipyards, which were largely composed of skilled or semi-skilled laborers. Managers altered the nature of the work, shifting to an emphasis on prefabrication to enable newcomers to enter higher-paid, semi-skilled work like welding, burning, and ship fitting. With this increase in employment came an increase in disposable income that was spent on the commercial thoroughfare of 7th Street. The migrant blacks that took residence in established black neighborhoods further consolidated the black middle class. Because West Oakland was already home to an established black population, black migrants from the South were naturally drawn there. With little assistance from the private sector, blacks remained in West Oakland and relied on public housing programs. In her book, The Second Gold Rush, Marilyn Johnson proposed that segregation was implemented in hopes of reducing interracial contact and diffusing tension, and was accepted in hopes of preserving social harmony through the war emergency. Nonetheless, the influx of black migrants into West Oakland proved profitable for 7th Street. With a consolidated consumer base to support it, 7th Street flourished. Southern blacks brought with them the culture of owning property, and soon both sides of 7th Street became lined with cleaners, markets, groceries, liquor, furniture, pharmacies owned by blacks. The epitome of 7th Street, however, was its nightlife and its music. Dance halls, theaters, cafes, and clubs lined the streets. The majority of West Oakland's jazz clubs were found on 7th Street, more than 15 by the mid-1940s. Because black musicians were not allowed into the local 6 of the American Federation of Musicians, they were prevented from playing in clubs in downtown Oakland. 7th Street became the place to play. Styles like New Orleans, swing, bebop, and blues could be heard up and down the street. The new style was called the West Coast Blues. To hear the West Coast Blues, the place to be was Slim Jenkins, the most renowned club on the West Coast. It attracted a mixed clientele and the hottest names in jazz and blues, like Nat King Cole, B.B. King, Charles Brown, the Ink Spots, Aretha Franklin, Duke Ellington, and Sarah Vaughan. As San Francisco became more urban, industrial, and crowded during the second half of the 19th century, some San Francisco elites migrated to Oakland to escape. The DeFermery family was one of several wealthy families who built giant Victorian mansions on large estates in the heavily wooded area of western Oakland. The DeFermery family had responded to these negative connotations of urbanization decades earlier by fleeing San Francisco. The DeFermery estate would be converted into Oakland's first municipal playground in 1907 when the city bought it from James DeFermery Jr. The federally funded Work Progress Administration, WPA, and Oakland Recreation Department jointly established an Oakland Recreational Leadership Project in the DeFermery Park Clubhouse. DeFermery was used for training for recreational leaders that would be hired as a part of the federal government's effort to expand employment. The beginning of World War II in 1939 would have a drastic impact on West Oakland. War industry jobs were abundant, and as a result, the great migration of African Americans from the South flowed into West Oakland for these jobs, just as white immigrants had decades earlier to work on the railroads. Additionally, many military recruits and draftees from around the nation arrived in West Oakland, many of whom would be stationed at the Oakland Army Base. These demographic shifts, as well as the widespread emphasis on contributing to the war cause, would reshape the way the infirmary was used in that era. Throughout the war, the infirmary would serve as the local home of the Black USO, where African American servicemen could enjoy recreational activities such as games and dances within the context of the racial segregation at the time. The transformation of the infirmary into the Black USO illustrates how the war cause placed new demands on the use of public spaces, and also how the community mobilized to address a need that the war created in their community.
Now, excerpts from Frances Mary O'Brier, the determined advocate for racial equality. An interview conducted by Malka Chal, 1977-1978.
I wanted to find out some more about your work today, and we never did talk about the opening of the Defremery Hospitality House during the war for black soldiers, wasn't it? Black, not soldiers.
Servicemen, for servicemen.
Servicemen, yes,
Yes.
that's the overall. Now, how did it come about that you had to organize or did organize a hospitality house at Defremery?
When the war first began, they sent out 400 servicemen, was in the 495th Quartermasters to Oakland, and they helped build the Oakland headquarters for servicemen. What do you call those camps?
I see. Mm-hmm.
For servicemen. They built the all of the barracks and everything for a camp for the war area. And most of these men were from New York, Chicago, and the eastern states. And it was just the beginning of the war, just the beginning when they began to recruit men into the Army and the Navy at that time. And there were no places for them to have recreation. And we found that a great many of them were wandering up and down 7th Street, going into the bars, and some of them getting lonesome and getting drunk and getting into trouble at the request of some of the railroad employees, the porters and the dining car men, who were also disturbed about that. So we called a meeting of people in the Defremery Clubhouse, the Defremery Park Clubhouse, to see what we could be done. And out of that meeting, we proceeded from the city to get the Defremery Clubhouse as a clubhouse for the men, and to use that building. The city set it aside, and it was doing the WPA days when they had workers that we could use to direct them and to direct the clubhouse. One of them at that time was Attorney Tom Berkeley, was a director. But we had to organize it, and we furnished the place up and redid it over and had club rooms and recreation rooms and dancing rooms. And then we proceeded then to form a women's group, hostess, to get the hostess and to get other women on the board of directors to work. And we had no money. We started out with no money. We started out that way, and finally we got good publicity from the papers, and we had rag drive sales, and we had all kinds of sales, and we wrote letters to different organizations. One of them, I think you see the letter, that gave $25 a month for the servicemen and their recreation at the time.
I see.
And so we would have to be kind to these boys, and the war was beginning, and we didn't know how many we would have to serve. But anyway, we were getting to serve them. After that, after we were in service for 7-8 months, then USO came
I see.
in. They were organized, and they came in, and they took over the same building.
Yeah. Oh, they did.
Yes. Now, they had one for whites
Yes.
and one for blacks. But at our building, we had them all together.
Oh, did you?
Yes, the boys walked over those discriminatory lines. The white boys came in, and we entertained them and treated them and fed them pies and cakes and whatever they wanted to eat, like we did the black boys.
Is that right?
And the black boys didn't resent them, servicemen, and they didn't resent each other. They were the type that just didn't resent each other.
Boy, that's interesting, because there was a color line drawn by the USO.
There was a color line drawn, but it was beginning at that time that line was beginning to break and not being able to hold by the young people.
Well,
A great many of the servicemen helped break that line. And it was at the time also in the Democrat Party that we stressed to Truman about breaking
I
the
see.
desegregation, desegregating the Army and the Navy.
Which you did.
Yes. It was through the efforts. It was a great many of those men went overseas together, and they were in battle together. And some of the black boys saved the white boys, and some of the white boys saved the black boys. And they came back over here with that in mind, that they were going to do all they could to end discrimination.
I see.
The Red Cross would try to discriminate them on the ships, those that was wounded. And they'd say, listen, that's my buddy. My buddy helped save my life, and I want his bed by my bed. Many of the white boys would say that,
I see.
would make those remarks against discrimination and insist that they still be with their black buddies and their white buddies from overseas.
What was the general feeling in the black community about the Japanese at the time of the war, Pearl Harbor, and the Japanese internment?
Well, the black community didn't have too much to say. They couldn't believe that the Japanese were going against this country, that they were really meant to fight. They thought, the black community felt like they should have put, the Germans was the one that started the war, and they should have been in concentration camp too, and that they were segregating the Japanese alone by themselves. It wasn't fair. It should have been both of them. But the Japanese and the blacks in the country at that time both were discriminated against. It's unfortunate, but it took the war to bring out a great many of those truths about people
Yes.
and human beings. So we served, I think it was 10 months,
I see.
the servicemen in the Bay Area, before USO came in and took over. The USO was fortunate in the Bay Area that they didn't have to start from groundwork up. We had laid the ground, and they just took over where we left off. We turned it over to them.
I see. That's right.
The Defremery House was once again used as a place for black veterans of Oakland to congregate. On February 28, 2015, it was the place to be to celebrate Black History Month in honor of our soldiers. Music, dance, good food, and local dignitaries made it a day to remember.
Can I get an hoorah? I knew it was out there waiting to be exploded. Listen, first of all, it's kind of hard to follow that wonderful color guard we had. Absolutely outstanding, from the Oakland Military Institute, founded by the governor of the state of California. I think we should give them applause.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you so much for inviting the mayor to your event today, and I'm so sorry she couldn't make it, but I feel honored to present the proclamation she's written for you in her stead. And whereas in 1948, President Harry S. Truman signed Executive Order 9981, which states, "It is hereby declared to be the policy of the President that there shall be equality of treatment and opportunity for all persons in the armed services without regard to race, color, religion, or national origin. And whereas the people of Oakland honor and recognize the outstanding contribution African American servicemen and servicewomen have made serving in the United States Armed Forces, now therefore be it proclaimed that Saturday, January 28th, 2015 is African American Military History Day in the city of Oakland, encouraging its recognition by all its citizens. In witness thereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the city of Oakland to be affixed." So there you go.